Hey, Tracy Learning Center. Here's the longest 5 minutes you ever seen for different arts that I've done. Derek Franz here in Greenfield, California. Here's a mural I did for the Upward Bound program over at Challenger High School. Another mural for Challenger High School. Just come up with this idea myself. Here we got the path, the long gregarious path of a student trying to get to the island of prosperity through all their challenges. And here we got the island once they get there. It's just filled with a bunch of math formulas for understanding the world in a deeper way. Here's an art mural I did. It's a 3-part, it's a 8 by 12 mural of world music. Did for taught art as an assistant for the recovery credit program. And it says right there, 2018 summer. There's pictures of kids working on that mural. Here's a bunch of vinyl cut. I have a roll-in vinyl cutter that does vector work. These are all hand drawn and then scanned and vectorized and turned into. This was a cool mural idea for the ceiling of hospitals to give patients something to look at while they're traveling, like their pulse is traveling through all the rooms of the hospitals. Gives them something to look at. Here's some kind of large-scale metal work I did for Moorpark College for fun, moonlighting as a sculpture student post-grad. Here's some private commission patron art. Here's a four-part metal sculpture. It's super big, all made out of CNC scraps, and these are kinetic, so you can pull on handles to make the wings flap. The patron liked the rust patina. She didn't want to paint it. Neither did I. Here's some small-scale dragons for finials, they call them. There's tops of caps. Here's a stainless steel fence I made out of old bus station kiosks. And here's a cat found object welded together. I like working with springs and cutting wrenches up, that's for sure. Here's his nose is a latch. His eyes are casters. Those might be his ears. Who knows? Yeah, some Calder-inspired mobiles, all made from industrial scrap. In this case, car light bars, and you know, it's just components that were being auctioned and thrown away by municipals. One of my favorite sources of materials. I did the knee wall here, thousands of pounds of concrete pour, and you know, did the reinforced rebar internal structure. You know, put a bunch of Simpson strong ties around the perimeter, and then you know, once I did that dirty work and ruined a couple nice pairs of jeans, then the patron I was working for, she you know, had the easy job of just doing the carpentry, and I helped her, you know, put the beams up, but she's the one that does all the tile setting and the window, the glazing. Made this most myself and sourced in this arced metal from a local retrofitted fence. So sometimes, you know, we find these materials and then all of a sudden we're like, how can we make these materials promoted to a place of stature? And I'm pretty good at sourcing materials. Like all these are, most of these beams are structural select that I got just on a, you know, classifieds ad score in Los Angeles. Being from Los Angeles and having so many millions of people around me, that's kind of spoiled for materials acquisition on the cheap. Here's a copper plasma cut dragon on a gate that I created. It was based on this screen print that I did long ago, and the patron wanted a dragon fence, which can be opened. Made the fence too, and I said, well, let's go with this art. You know, it's a dragon that means something to me. It's a hand drawn, and dragons mean something to you, my patron. So put my art into a higher level of performance right there. Here's my older truck. It's a 89 Toyota. I made this kind of arboretum topper for the back of it, and then over here, once the engine threw a rod, turned this thing around, cut it all to smithereens, and just turned it into a trailer. So I didn't, you know, I was kind of committed to this. You know, once you put a bunch of metal work into making the back of the truck look good, and then the front of the truck dies, turn it into a trailer. It's kind of fun and noisy. And then, yeah, I'm a bit of a recycler, so I took the front of the truck and put it on a 92 Toyota model. So this is a double truck. Made the tailgate or the truck bed have another version of the same architecture as the front of the truck. So, boy, sometimes I get honks while I was driving this, and people on the freeway at 60 miles per hour, they want to wave at me like I'm a celebrity. Couldn't roll into a gas station without being considered a celebrity with this silly truck. It's a little top heavy though. It's not a really good idea to put 200 pounds of glass and steel at 15 feet. You know, if I had taken a couple more engineers courses by then, I would have maybe chose a different design. Well, you'll see the next design next. And here's a trailer that I outfitted with plexiglass ribs. These ribs are originally from satellite dishes, so I'm all about, you know, what's available, and sometimes stuff will just sit in the back of the lot for a couple years, and all of a sudden I'll realize I know what this is for. Here's a truck I drive around now. This is just plastic and sheet steel up here and plexiglass or polycarbonate walls, more aluminum, lightweight stuff. This one wouldn't roll over. Here's a fun exhibit window. Now I'm going through all the metal. It's gonna be a long tour. Here's a wood and urbanite concrete slabs. You know, found this at my old kindergarten. Found this. You know, just funny stories. You know, like a guy needs what did he need? I went to his house on an unrelated thing, maybe to pick up something. You know, maybe he had some scraps. Maybe he needed something moved. I think he needed dirt delivered. He needed dirt delivered. He maybe contacted me for some dirt because he was redoing his front lawn, and then, you know, he's like in my dad a little bit. And he's like, well, what can I give you? He gave me a box of copper pipes to recycle, and I noticed that he was knocking around the slab in his backyard, and I said, let's take those pieces of concrete. I'll get paid to install them at my friend's house. These are Bertoia columns. These pieces of metal sheet steel were bought brand new and parallel casted into a resin base. They're based off of art by Harry Bertoia from Pennsylvania. He's deceased at this time, but he did a series of art called Somnambulance. And he's a famous artist. You go to the Huntington Museum in LA and they'll have his pieces, garden pieces that just vibrate, big, huge pieces of steel that vibrate in the wind. And then I made them, you know, small scale, 4 feet tall, 3 feet tall, 2 feet tall, and then put them on stage with a choreographer over at Moorpark College. Here's some fun found art creations, you know. What am I going to do with a pallet jack? Some shelving, shock or strut, and an old razor scooter. You know, make a pallet jack scooter. What am I going to do with 2 different sizes of bike? Put them together, sell it for 65 bucks on classifieds within 2 days of finishing it. This seat was a little bit unstable. It looked good, but it didn't work. So when I sold it, we knocked the seat down to that height. Here's some art kind of imaginative art designs for the community college. Welding structures, concentric, circular things. Here's the finished version of all these melted vinyl records. Here's a kinematic art where all these masks, they undulate. There are each about 5 to 7 different pieces of plastic that are connected with a bunch of materials, you know, like copper wire and elastic, and then the metal structure with a camshaft in the back. You rotate it, and then these masks undulate in and out of phase with expression like squinting and opening their mouths. Here's some body size things. This guy's about 9 feet tall. He's got a dog. All found metal. His chest plate's made out of like a teak reel-to-reel recorder. You know, everything's got a place. His rib cages are made out of trays for laser printers. And then here's a close-up of the dog. His eyes are made out of speakers. He's got a brain pan, which is made out of an old dipping tray for photography negatives. You know, you can just point to something, and this is from a steel drum. This is from a rack. Here's a portal system made out of futon parts. Here's a giant ant slash elephant that I made out of a wheelbarrow and some tusks. So I did a lot of screen printing, so I handmade a screen stretcher out of clamps, and they look like crossbows. And here's a kind of like an antlion suspended precarious double exposure unit that I made, because for a custom job for a patron, you know, it's like we're working with a bigger screen and I can't fit that in my little cubby where I do my exposures for like 18 by 24 screens. So I made this kind of mobile exposure unit, and literally had to do it in their garage because my space is so cluttered. I didn't have a footprint that was like a 5 by 3 space available to do an exposure of a screen. Here's a bunch of trash that's zip tied to a Ziggurat structure. Here's a overhead resin casted skylight experiment. It's a pretty big one. Each one, this panel might be about 12 by 5. Here's all these different little pieces of resin cast. Resin's kind of poisonous and not exactly something you can give to kids. But, you know, plastic liquid is a very cool structural option. I love mixing it with ceramic or with clay. You know, you can pour resin into clay and then just peel the clay off. Here's a samurai and falcon made out of printer parts. Here's one of my first pieces of art. It's a ceramic piece. We're getting into ceramics now, I guess. You know, terracotta body. It's originally from Star Trek, where you have a kind of a body profile shape, and then inside of them is a bunch of voices, a bunch of little primitive spirits inside their chest. So here's that mural I might have mentioned to you, the 3-part tree mural on the wall of a restaurant in San Francisco. Here's all these different ceramics that were on the scene at a beach in 2009 or so. So it's 4 years of college level ceramics. Here's some bowls I made in my backyard, cone 10, 2-part wax resist glazing. You know, same thing, make a beautiful bowl and make it shine, give it 2 colors, paint it. Here's some sculptures. Here's a lady and a fish. This one was made with plaster cast assemblage. Some more hand building characters, a scorpion and a lady. This is an early one that was never high fired, just went with acrylic paint. This is supposed to be a cave with air, wind emanating from it. Here's some fun art. These are troughs that latex was poured into so I can make stamps. Latex poured into make stamps, glue the stamps onto juice bottles and roll them to make different kind of art, you know, rolling stamps through paint. Here we have wax poured into copies of, you know, Christmas time star plastics, made plaster copies of them. Here we have a wax 3D print made with 2D prints. So I made this in Google SketchUp, converted it into slices of the shape, and then kind of blended those shapes so that they were singular profiles of the perimeters, and then laser cut them all, and then stacked them, registered them, and then poured wax into them and made a 3D object out of the computer and a laser cutter. Here's some more ceramic stabiles, as Colder would call them. Here's some more of those minimalist stabiles. You'll notice these 4 pieces are the same piece made over and over and over. This one's a fun one because it's throwing 4 bowls in the same sitting in the same wad of clay, lump of clay, throwing off the mound, they say. So you make 4 bowls, and then the idea for this, you might see there's a fountain. So all these would pump a little bit of water out, and then it would trickle. But this one would trickle the best because it'd be fill and fill and fill and fill and then fall. And these ones are just pour at the horizontal. Yeah, here's a Mayan calendar made out of clay. Here's a Ziggurat made out of clay. Here's fun little figural pieces. Notice the feather added to that one. This one, actually, the ball in the middle is loose, so it's a shaker, and it's held in by that hand. These are hand-sized shakers. Oh, a little statuary bas-relief character. High relief. Check out that undercut. Now over here we got a lot of dolls. I did a lot of knitting, my 20s, leather work, You know, here his head is made out of redwood sprigs. His hands are made out of Fimo. His head and feet are made out of leather. Fimo, thistle, or sizzle. Yeah, sizzle. Some cool found tapestries from Guatemala. Wrapped legs, wireframe body, and then a custom little knit shirt. He's got a wireframe in that little hat. So here's Plushies. Here's a manticore. It's kind of saggy. It's hard to hold up big characters. You know, it's hard to give them an armature that holds their shape, but also you'd want to, like, you know, use as a plush doll, because the heart of the armature, who'd want to hold it, who'd want to cuddle a piece of steel. This is a screen printed scorpion. Here's some gloves I knit for myself. Here's some leather booties, moccasins made for a friend. Knit those socks first. Here's me with my wireframe glasses sewn together. Here's some dresses I made out of scraps of fabric. Here's some screen prints, just hand drawn, two color screen prints. Here's some embroideries. This is from a video game character called a Durin. That's hand drawn, converted. These are a kind of CNC machine. Singer put out a machine called the Futura, which was super prosumer level. I guess it was like a $700 purchase, but I could you know, convert pictures into threads, which is what I wanted to do for a couple years. Always exploring something new. Here's a bunch of velvet scraps that I turned into a cylindrical, almost like a tholos of a hat. Absolutely gorgeous and absolutely free, because no one really wants to put the effort into attaching all those samples together. There's some embroideries on a hat I made. This is actually the interior liner of a hat I bought, and then I liked it enough to flip it around. Here's a friend of mine wearing a Space Warp sweater I knit, and this was knit out of photography film found in a dumpster of CVS. You'll notice the RBG, or the cayenne, transparent cyan, yellow. There's no special word for yellow, and magenta. 4-color printing, they say. Here's one of the first, my favorite college sweaters I knit. And here's a hand-sewn collage scene of a forest. Here's some clothing, sewn shapes with 3M retroflective material. This one's a pretty cool piece of work because it's all these vinyl strips that were connected with Fresnel lenses, and they were soldered into wires, and the wires are stabilized inside of the vinyl, and the vinyl is sewn like a sailing tarp with a sewing awl. So that one took a lot of work, but this one was inspired by the material, you know. The community college that I was at, you know, all of a sudden they're putting in hundreds of rolls or hundreds of tubes of piping, and all of them have these caps on them, these end caps to protect them from rats moving in while they're in storage. And then there's just littered around the campus before the construction workers could collect them and throw them away. I said, hey, can I have those? I'm an artist. I'm going to put them into good use. And yeah, they're happy to help. Just takes asking sometimes. Here's some electronic art. So this one's pretty cool. It's a board of copper brads that are suspended and electrified. It doesn't hurt. You can touch it just fine because it's only like half the circuit. You're not completing the circuit through your body. And it's resin casted clear. So you roll around these balls, and then they connect the electric lights, the power sources, to the lights that are hidden under the board. And then wherever you roll these metal, steel wool coated ping pong balls, or they might have been heavier, they might have been ball bearings, then it makes lights go off. So it's pretty cool. It was a gutted original pinball machine board anyway. This is all hand designed, maybe 700 lights up there, and you roll these characters around the perimeter, and these diodes tell which lights to turn on, which lights to not turn on. And then these kids could just play a little board game, kind of like Parcheesi. And then as they walk the characters around, it would make different symbols out of the grid of lights in the center. Here's an electric typewriter. Here's a concentric hologram prototype, visualizer prototype. That's a slip ring that I made myself. Here's those grad school projects, the thesis projects where I had meet playing video games via iPads with software that I designed myself. Here's the digital rotisserie where little smoky sausages were rolling on rotating iPads that were playing custom barbecue software. Here's a gear and cog. These gears and cogs were printed with intermittent teeth so that this horsey, you'd roll the gears with the hand crank on the side, exact same plexiglass and wood design character here, and then the teeth, they would build up and then they would let go. If there's no teeth to hold the motion, then it just kind of kicks back, so that you might have a spring or a twisted rubber band holding tension, and then once it misses a tooth, then it unrolls or it falls. So here's some art I did for a kind of a LA party scene thing. We got my light table with a camera on the bottom so that people could play with this thin layer of blue water, and then a camera is recognizing when they break through the blue water to make it transparent, and then it does a couple different algorithms to find the perimeter and the locuses, I guess they're called loci, of the displacement of color, and then you get these cool, real-time analysis of what you're doing with your hands. And then I was working with industry surplus, so I had all these crosswalk signs that people could turn on and off. Had all these this array of 20 by 80 lights, all wired so that people could play it with an electronic baton on a bunch of metal tines, transmitting electricity to all of the LEDs. Here's some circuit boards I made. This is just an LED 8 light LED 0 through 9 display, and here's 1 through 9, the different diode sets that are required to light it up. And here's some just custom circuit boards I made for an independent study student, and this is one of that student's metal fabrication class designs that I helped them come up with the idea. I sourced all the materials, and that was an independent study over at Santa Cruz. Here's some more electronic art. All these tines are suspended inside of a low voltage piece of chicken wire that's coated in steel wool, so that whenever one of those tines is bumped against, it will touch the perimeter of its circle, and then it'll light up the light on top. So it's sort of like you rub your hand on the bottom, and then they all sway back and forth, and then you can visualize the sway on the light board. Pretty ingenious stuff. Here's what the wiring, I like messes and chaos, so here's what the wiring of the light board looked like, so you got your clean minimalist op art over here, and then you got your chaos and engineers crazy contraption aspect of it over here. Here's what those circuit boards look like when they're in the computer before they're etched. They are screen printed. It's a secret trick where you screen print a resistive lacquer, which is like a gum, like a chicle, liquid chicle, and then you dip the copper clad laminate in acid, agitate it a bit, wash it off, and then it's a subtractive process for sure. So here's a kind of concept art, never completed it, but we have 4 video game controllers, and the idea was you're going to play 4 video game systems at the same time using the actual controllers for the actual video game systems. So the idea was you can play 4 copies of your favorite game at the same time, and then you can find out if the 4 games are exactly the same. If you play the same game with the same controls, but the game has different random number generations, then you're going to walk into different games, even though you're the same person. So here's me on scene with my digital rotisserie. Here's some music, electronic music art, using amplifiers and transducers so that you could hear these hand-tempered tines amplified. Here's daxophones. It's another amplification art. If you rub these wooden rulers, they'll start to groan You can rub them with a violin bow or a hurdy-gurdy. Here's a water electronic art. So I rewired a basketball scoreboard from Daktronics to be controlled by a bowl of salt water. So you roll the bowl of salt water around, and then it lights up and soaks in the water, and the more it soaks, the more voltage gets across. So the light goes from glowing to brightly flashing, based on how drowned it is in salt water that's electrified. So I made these light player piano systems where I'd algorithmically compose these records, and then these tines would pick up, print them on metal, and then the tines would pick up the rotation and then light up the array of lights. These are called glow cores. They're resin casted nails with LEDs on top of them that you play on your hands. Here's a kilt made out of 6 rubber keyboards, so you can have you know, a couple hundred buttons independently controlling computer signals. So you can kind of perform with this, you know. I definitely did with the custom software. This is a really cool algorithmic piece. This is the internal tine matrix of a Hammond organ. Hammond organs are really amazing old machines that used rotation and amount of copper and rotation of electronic pickups to generate tones. So it's not even, in my opinion, it's not even electronic. It's just mechanical. It's electromechanical generated sounds. So this piece of algorithm, these rays would branch out, and once they break, then the difference between a break and a still going tine generates a fracture tine. So as it breaks, there's always a new boundary of breakage, and then those boundaries have the ability to angle out. So it has the ability to go around corners. So I was really proud of this program. Here's some other computer programs. This one, I never took calculus, but you know, looking at a calculus book and kind of reverse engineering it best I could, I came up with these warp field programs where these bubbles would move along the, what do you call them, like the profiles, like the hairlines of these warp fields. Here's Unrolling Pottery. Kind of ethereal space. You can see through things in a new way when you unroll. Take a video of rotating, concentric rotating object. Kind of like stroboscopes a little bit. Here's the software that unrolled this piece of pottery into this slab picture. And here's generating some of those records with custom software. You can see the radial matrix and the programming. Here's some more programming examples. Here's a visualization of geometric shapes colliding with each other, and when they do, it releases certain musics based on the sides of these shapes. Here we have a pentagon and a triangle. These circles represent where there's collision. And here's light tracking, so you can send out, I like to think of them as little digital ants, and they follow these sugar trails, and then they eat the picture up, and then they kind of keep a vector record of where they've been. So it sort of turns a raster image, a pixel image, into a geometric list of locations. Here's a visualization of division. So each one of these lines is a representation of like 5 divided by 7, 5 divided by 8, 5 divided by 9, and then all the 10 numbers are just 10 colors. And so the decimal point's length here is about 10 digits, 7 digits, 5 digits, 2 digits. So this is kind of basics. Sadly, they don't teach this kind of stuff. You know? Kind of basic patterns of division visually. This is actually a web design interface. So I like to make tools, and here this tool supersedes like Dreamweaver. You know, it's an environment to create web pages. You take a picture, you place it on the field, you expand it, and then after everything's placed, you take a list of all those positions and you kind of automatically parse it into div tags, which allow pictures to float in HTML on a page. So it sort of turns web design into like an art space. and then you just have to upload the giant HTML page. It's automatically generated. That's one thing I learned about in grad school, is how to play with giant lists of data and then just put header files on them and then turn it into a video file, picture file, web file. So here's the different algorithm setups. This one's a dilation program that takes a word and then expands the perimeter of it while revolving the color. And then this is your template for the palette for what colors you're expanding. And then here's a geometric writing program that makes videos of what you're writing. Animated videos. Here's a Tetris video game where you can choose any yellow shape you want. Here's a claymation writing program. Here's a collision detection of two shapes and the omission of the cross boundary, so that this recursive expansion outside of these two shapes is not hindered by the overlap. That overlap is negated, so you can sort of sum two different geometric shapes in this program. And then this one is colliding pebbles. They expand and then they hit each other's boundaries, so you can just drop all these pebbles and they start expanding, and then once they hit a boundary, then they hold their shape and they're stuck. Geometry everywhere. Here's some video game level design, because underneath a lot of early video games there's just lists of numbers, and then those numbers are swapped out for tile types. They mostly did that for memory constraints of early video games, I guess. Just how to do things. Here's I don't do much 3D GL design, but again, this is a tool. This is kind of the equivalent of Blender. It's an environment to create lists of GL instructions, so you can create 3D worlds just with lists of shapes and blend modes and textures and cones and rays. So sometimes I don't fit into the programs that are out there, and I want to make my own programs. So when someone says, do you know how to do 3D design? And I'm like, I've made my own 3D design environment. Do you know how to do web design? It's like, well, yeah, to the point where I've made my own web designed environment. Here's another music environment. These lines represent the speed change and the sample location of all of these samples, and then these colors in a row. This would go make the sound green, make the sound green, make the sound, so make that sound, then the blue, then this other blue, and then this green. So you'd be able to save 12 different sounds based on how the speed of the sound is touched in this environment. These are all visual environments to create music in this case. And then this row is your sequence. So you can play the green, green, blue, green 2, green sounds. Here's a cool little iterative process. This just shows you the binary bitmap. I needed this picture. It's a binary decoder, but this one's linear. And here's a cool fractal program I made. This is really automatic, where you make a line randomly, you cut it at a random place, and then you make a branch off of it of a random length, and then you cut the system in another random place and you make a branch off of it, and cut the system in another random place and make a branch off of it. And then the rules and the constraints for this one, obviously you can see most of the branches, or most every branch is at like a 30 or 60 degree angle. That's just one of these numbers right here. So change it to 45 and then you'd have a different kind of snowflake creation. This one was tough to generate because the program has a lot of rules to follow to never cross over itself. So if it's this purple line, you always want it to grow down. And then once this purple line over here, you always want it to grow to the right. But as you notice, like some purple lines are growing this way, some purple lines are going that way, some purple lines are going that way. So it's a very dynamic rule set to make it look coherent. So video game worlds, this one's take a bunch of pre-existing pictures and then create a ring of them, so you can sort of make the illusion that you're walking through an environment because the rotating environment behind you. So in this environment, you can feel like you're in a 2D world that's rotating around you, and then you just swap out off screen the next pictures to make it feel like you're endlessly rotating in a place. Here's a 2D world that's based on this overhead map. This one was inspired by living in South Dakota, where there's absolutely no topography. It's just a flat plain for as far as I can see. So as you drive across South Dakota, you see these lights in a really mathematical way, because there's no landscape to restrict the lights. Here's collision detection algorithms. Kind of complicated, but I love it. Collision detection algorithm, one of my favorites. My other favorite algorithm is light reflection. Here's video repositioning, play space. Here's Markov chains. Here's some collaging with triangles program. And this is what I did with the collaging with triangles program. I made these gradient masks and then embedded pictures in it so that they kind of overlap. Here's one more example. Yeah, just one more example. Desert themed. Here's morphing between geometric letters. Any geometry will morph to any other geometry based on just interpolation of data sets. Here's a program that I made that takes a 2D drawing and converts it into 3D drawing, which is a little complicated because this line right here, the square, is just you know, two positions, the top and the bottom of the ray. But over here, it's a center space for a cylinder and a rotation of the cylinder and a length of the cylinder. So the 3D world and the 2D world have different variables to generate it. Here's some computer-generated high resolution records. These are binary encoder records, and they're also just op art. Here's what happens when you turn the numbers up to the point where you can't even see the detail. And then here's some more of the kind of vector conversion art that I did. It was all the biggest deal when Adobe Photoshop came out with vector conversion. You know, back 10-20 years ago, we only have one computer license in the college that could convert a raster image to a vector image, and we were all just mystified at that conversion. And you know, I messed around with it and was able to come up with my own conversion algorithms. So more video art, geometry, Pythagorean, fractal geometry art. These are all videos, just stills of videos. Here's my web pages. This one's called Dismantle. This one's called Electromancy. Genealogy of Video Games, Electromancy Part 2. Genealogy of Video Games 2 and 3. Here's screen printed folders I made for elementary school that I had a week-long tenure as a substitute, and there's my stand standing on a bunch of photo negative collages. So these are all scraps from doing screen printing with photo emulsion, photo exposure, and then after you have all these, you know, a couple years of art, you can just cut them up and do collages with them. Source material. Here's some screen prints. These are all photo emulsion screen prints, originally hand drawn. Here's a mountain. This is like Big Basin over by Santa Cruz, kind of a mountain walkway with the beach in the background. Here's a fun piece of art. It originally is just really one or two lines, and then if you just separate the colors, the color zones, it looks like it's very, very complicated, but it's just this two layers of paint and generally just one or two lines. Same here. All these lines, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. This might be just about 10 lines, but it's so luscious. And it was printed on the back of a Sterilite packing storage container. Here's a bunch of glyphs I made. These are for light art. These would be back projected through clear transparency with LEDs and color gels. Here's some computer art. These are all cellular automata chains. So this picture right here is the culmination of, you know, 15 by 20, so it's like 300 different stills of computer-generated textures, and then they're all sorted and ordered. And then this is just a hand drawing. It sort of looks like termites eating out the interior lining of a bark. and then this was inverted, so I drew everything that's white, and then you just print the negative, and it looks kind of like a fun organic texture. Here's some more screen prints. Nothing really to say other than, you know, it's visual art, hand drawn. Here's some blends. Blends are really powerful. This might only be 2 layers of paint, but with blends, it looks like 6 layers. Same here, 2 layers of paint. Here's what they look like before they're screen printed. I just drew these, you know, in free time. Space theme, Mayan theme, the ball game, castle theme. You know, just go into Photoshop, touch them up a little bit, get rid of the color noise, and give them color boundaries. Paint fill, fun coloring books. Here's some beach scene. I do like this geometric kind of like coral style of drawing. Here's caves. Here's a lady teacher and a student. Some people. See the type of people I draw. Kind of Native American, kind of hieroglyphic. Here's some vector art that I did when I had some time at a computer during the ID Tech summers. This was a video animation and undersea water. Here's some covers for music albums and DVDs, DVD menus, music albums. These are my own music and album designs. DVD menu or cover. Here's some collages. These are made of LP record covers and spray painted paper cut out. And sometimes this is textbooks. Sometimes this is just, you know, found little pieces of media. You know, covers of board games, magazine pages, a little bit of hand drawing, inserts from CDs. Here's some photo collages, which is one of my first arts, where I'd find hundreds of thrown away photos and then just cut them up and use them as the shapes for compositions. You know, here I kind of cut up different geometric grains and then use them as the perimeters of prominent pictures. And then, you know, self-explanatory, just shapes and collage of shapes. Sometimes you can just find art books, cut them up, make a new piece of art. This is a very large collage. It must have been about 8 by 5 feet. And this is just a bunch of pictures of lawyers that were in front of a bunch of books, and then I just took the books and made a maelstrom of them. Collage of Franz Boas anthropology of native culture designs on pottery and weavings, intermixed with radar arrays and electronic warfare diagrams. And then this is all hand cut. This is actually the exact same pieces of vinyl. So it's like 4 pieces of vinyl were cut up in the exact form, so far the exact way, and then they were intermingled such that you have the same exact composition 4 times. And yeah, if you look at it, they're exactly the same picture, but they're just interexchanged colors. So this was the type of collage I was doing. Like this one is 3 pieces of paper. You only see one of the versions here, but there's 2 other versions of this piece of art that are based on the exact same color palette and the exact same pieces of paper. This one's vinyl. And this one's just kind of free play with die cutters. So that's what my artwork is looking like. So this culminates, you know, like 2000. Maybe like one of the pieces in here was 1998, 1997. Maybe 1998, all the way up to 2016, 2017. Maybe the newest piece in here is the car and the fence made out of stainless steel. Thanks for looking.